Can you tell us what your name is?
Evelyn Louzine Jenkins Wilson.
When were you born?
March 6, 1940.
Where do you live?
I live at Bracetown, North Carolina.
Were you born in Bracetown?
No, I was born at Culberson, North Carolina.
Is that far from Bracetown?
Pretty far.
Is there, did your parents tell you anything interesting about the day you were born? Were you born at home or were you born in a hospital?
I was born at home, and my mother said the snow was up over the porch the day I was born, but the doctor come to the house, and that was really good that he did.
Well, what about your name? Where did your name come from? Was there something special behind it?
I was named after Aunt Grace. Her name was Evelyn Grace, and I was named after her. And the Louzine part, Daddy, they found out years ago, they found out he had 3 kidneys, and he had to have surgery and have one of them taken out. And their nurse, that was her name, Louzine, and they said it was a French Indian name. So that's how I got my Louzine part. And I was named after Aunt Grace.
Did you ever have any nicknames?
All kinds. My prettiest nickname, Bernice's mother gave me it. I was called Zine. She called me Zini. And the kids, Kenneth and Lucky and all of them, they call me Tooge. That was my nickname.
So where did those names come from? What did they mean?
They just made them up. I don't know where Grace got the zinnia at. She probably thinking about the flower zinnias.
You was probably pretty as a flower.
I don't know about that.
Well, tell us about your family. You weren't an only child, so you had a big family.
Yeah. Mama had 11 children, but 2 died as babies, so she just raised 9. And
did most of your family stay around Culberson, or did they go?
No, they went up north to work. My brothers went up north to work in the automobile factories. And they got up there and got married and didn't come back. Didn't come back here to live. But they could make so much more money there than they could here. And Uncle Bars, he went up there first. And so they went, most of them stayed with Uncle Bars till they got them a job. And so, Junior, he worked for Chrysler's. He worked for Chrysler's for years. But George didn't really work for the car companies. He worked at the A&P, for the A&P, and he worked in the warehouse and drove one of them little high-low machines that moves the food around in pasteboard boxes, and he had to keep up with that. June worked at the A&P. She was a cashier. And James and Joy went to Michigan, and James had a job in a box factory, but I talked them into coming back down here. And my Jerry drove a U-Haul truck and went up there and moved them back.
Well, why'd you talk them into coming back? You missed them too much?
Yeah, I thought they'd be better off here. And James got him a job with the Tennessee Copper Company, and he had a good job for years. And James said he was really glad that he come back.
Well, where were you at in the long list of kids? Were you you were the oldest or the youngest, or?
I had 2 brothers younger than me, and 2 brothers and 3 sisters older than me.
Did you always live in the same house?
No, we lived in different houses in the Culberson community. We lived at the burger place, and then we moved from the burger place. Aunt Grace talked us into it. She said it was too far from everybody else, and we had to walk a long ways to catch a school bus. And she said we needed to move. And Oliver's people was going up north to work in the tire factories. Oliver's aunt, and she owned a house out there below at Shady Grove, below where my sister lived. And they was going to go off and leave the house empty. And Aunt Grace said we could move in that house, and they'd be glad for somebody to live in it because they was all leaving. So we moved into the Gregory house, and the woman, Oliver's aunt, she went on up to Akron, Ohio. She made big money working in the, she worked where they made tires, Goodyear tires, I think. And she was a very sweet person. She kept coming back home till she was like in her 80s, I think, maybe the last time I seen her over at Aunt Grace's. She's probably 84, 85. And she had driven herself down here from Akron. And some of her other family members lived up there too.
Well, what about your mama and daddy, your parents? Were they from Culberson too?
Mama grew up at Peachtree. Daddy grew up at Culberson. That's where his daddy lived. His daddy lived up there around Mount Pleasant. But Mama lived at Peachtree. And when Grandpa decided to move to Culberson from Peachtree, after he moved, they had one more child, Grandpa and Granny. And the day that Aunt Kate was born to Granny Truitt, Faye was born to my mother. Faye was one of Mama's oldest kids. And they was both born on the same day, Faye and Kate. I thought that was remarkable. And Granny and Mama having a baby on the same day. Mm-hmm. And Faye and Kate was always big buddies, and every year they celebrated their birthdays and made a big thing about it because they was both born on the same day. And that was really phenomenal fact, you know. Mm-hmm. That was my Granny Truitt's last child and one of Mama's first ones, mm-hmm. or Mama's first girl. She had two baby boys that had died as babies. And then she had Faye was her next oldest one.
What did, so your parents' name was Gazzy and Charles. What did they do for a living?
Well, anything they could. Kenneth was telling me that Daddy used to work on the railroad. And I think that was out at Swannanoa or somewhere out there. And Mama couldn't stand to be away from her mother and Daddy, and she talked him into quitting his job and coming back here to live because she always said she regretted making him come back out here because out there he could make a good living, and here he couldn't make that much money, you know. And at one time they worked at a logging camp, and she cooked for the loggers, and Daddy worked, you know, with the men getting out the logs. Mm-hmm. And Mama got pregnant with one of her first kids, and she had to quit working.
Mm-hmm. Well, even though they come back, they may not have had money, but they were always real happy, weren't they?
Yeah.
Happy people?
Yeah. Mama wanted to be with her people, and she talked Daddy into quitting his job and coming back. Yeah, they were really happy. Good people, too. They don't seem to make them like that anymore.
So when you were young, who were your playmates? Probably the younger brothers, or?
Yeah. Mama wouldn't let us go to nobody else's house. She wouldn't let us bother nobody. So when we lived in the old Gregory place, Charles Stewart's mother sent word to Mama to let us come over to their house and play one day, because she knew that Mama wouldn't let us go no place unless she asked. And so we did. We went over there and played one day with Dorothy Mae and Charles and Robert, and stayed all day. Me and Dorothy Mae made gingerbread cookies, and we put candy corn on them, and it melted in the oven. And Ruth said, "Don't you girls know better than that? Put the candy." Said, "You put the candy on them after you get the cookies out." We made gingerbread cookies.
So, like you were talking about Granny Truitt having Kate and your mother having Faye, kind of the same thing happened by the time, because you were one of the younger kids, so by the time you come along, your older siblings, some of them had already had children.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those were some of your playmates too, weren't they?
Yeah. Faye had Mary, and so Mary was actually my niece when I was born. I was an aunt, because Faye had Mary, and they was always at our house. And when we was teenagers, Mary learned to drive, and I was scared to learn to drive. But when they wanted me to come home with them, they'd drive over and get me, and I'd stay at their house a few days, and I guess they'd get tired of me and they'd bring me back. But them was wonderful times. I didn't have to do nothing at Faye's house except watch TV. Me and Mary would sit up late and watch TV. We'd drink buttermilk and eat fudge and popcorn, watch TV.
Well, what did you have to do when you was at home? You had chores?
No, Mama just done everything. What I'd do, I would wash and clean and keep my clothes fixed up myself, which Mama didn't like it much. She wanted me just to throw my clothes in with everybody else's. And she did a big washing. But I washed up my own clothes and ironed them and fixed them up. But I didn't. And I'd do some house cleaning if I saw something needed to be done. And then I had rheumatic fever, and I wasn't supposed to do no work. And so that made a difference. If they saw me working much, they'd try to stop me.
Took you a long time to get over that?
Yeah, pretty good while. In the 11th grade, I took a little pill and rested 30 minutes.
At school, you mean?
At school, yeah. In the 11th grade, they let me go to the teacher's lounge, and I'd lay down and rest for 30 minutes and take my little pill for my heart. The sister closest to you, Genevieve, you and her and Mary were a threesome too, weren't you, playing? Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the story about the possum? Can you tell us a story about a possum?
Yeah, we was playing where Ranger School is now. We was playing down on the old road. There was apple trees down there, and past the old road, and we was playing down there, and we started back home, and there was a possum in the road, and it was laying real still like it was dead. And Mary said, "I'm not afraid of it." And the possum, was just sewed up. That's the way it protected itself. And Mary got it by the tail, picked it up, brought it to the house. Me and Genevieve wouldn't touch it. So we went to our playhouse where we'd been playing and dug it a grave and buried it and sung songs and had its funeral. And then Mama called us to come and eat dinner. And when we come back to our playhouse after dinner, the possum was gone. So it wasn't dead after all.
Yeah.
But Mary got it by the tail. She was the bravest one. She said, "I'm not afraid of it." She got it by the tail, and we took it to our playhouse and buried it. Had his funeral, sung songs.
So what other kind of games did you play?
Well, we played having a store, and we used empty Coke bottles for pretending they was full, you know. And we had to put boards between the trees to set our stuff on. We played having a store. And that's when we lived right up above the Ranger School. We lived there then.
So in the summer, did you go swimming? What did you do in the summer? Did you anything different than what you do in the winter?
No, Mama wouldn't let us go swimming. She's afraid we'd get drowned. But we just played around the house, and Lucky was a baby, and we had to help tend to him.
Well, what about in the winter? Did you do anything different in the winter?
When we lived at the old Gregory house, we'd get up to go to school. We had to still walk a good ways to catch a school bus. Me and the hill out the yard was kindly a little hill, and old round shaped, and me and James would take a straight back chair and lay it down in the grass when it had frosted, and we'd scoot it like it was a sled and then jump on it. And we used that chair back for a sled. We'd do that while we was waiting on the rest of them to get ready to go to school.
Did you like school?
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah.
Was there a lot of kids at your school?
Yeah, we always had a pretty good bunch.
What kind of traditions did your family have? Did they do something special at Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything, on birthdays or anything like that?
Yeah, we always had a big Christmas and a big Christmas tree and presents. And Mama'd always fix us up a brown bag full of all kinds of candy. She'd fix us a bag of about half full of candy. Just put it under the tree besides the other stuff we'd get for Christmas. We had a good time at Christmas.
What about at Thanksgiving?
Yeah, at Thanksgiving, Mama always cooked a turkey and made pumpkin pies. And I like it to this day, turkey and pumpkin pies. It's one of my favorite combinations, turkey and pumpkin pie.
What do you remember, from childhood that made an impact on you, like world events? Do you remember any? Like you were born, were you born during the war?
Well, the war just ended about
ended.
the time I was born. And Roy and Woodrow, they was in World War II, and they got to come home, which was wonderful that they did. Mm-hmm. So that was about all I knew about it. Mm-hmm. But Grace and Mars, they moved to Michigan, their whole family. Mm-hmm. And so they stayed up there. We'd get to see them in the summertime. They'd come back, and they'd stay at our house when they come back. Mm-hmm. Mama was a good cook. She liked to cook big bowls of cream corn, and all the good garden stuff. Feed everybody she could. And she could make the best biscuits I ever ate. I'd hang around the stove and just eat her biscuits as she got them ready.
When you'd go into town, when your mother and father would go to town to get groceries or to do whatever they needed, did they go to Murphy or did they go to Copper Hill? You're close to Copper Hill there.
This woman had a store up not too far from our house. That she was married to Grace's brother, Alvin Gladson was Grace's brother, and he married Vernon's sister, and she had a store, and Mama would like to go to her store and buy stuff, and she'd go get her groceries, and then Evelyn would bring her home, drive her home with her load of groceries.
So could she drive? Could Gazzy drive?
No, oh no, she never did.
Well, when you said you were too scared to drive a minute ago when you and Mary were young, when did you learn to drive?
After I got married and had Steve, and Jerry was gone all the time driving a big truck, and I knew I was going to have to learn to drive so I could go get groceries and take Steve to the doctor, and I could drive around town, you know, while he was gone in the big truck.
Who taught you?
I mostly taught myself. We had an automatic car, and Kay Killian, she told me how to drive it. She told me how to do, and I drove up the driveway to somebody's house and turned around and come back, and I left Steve asleep in his baby bed. And then after that, I seen I could drive it, and I went and got my driver's permit. So Kay sort of told me how to drive, and I did what she said.
What was the first job you ever had?
When
you were young, or whatever, when the first job you had?
The first job I had, well, at Christmas we worked at the dime store. And at Christmas time, that thing's going to bite you. At Christmas time, it was the only toy store in town, and it was really crowded. It was full as anybody could stick. That was my first job at Christmas time. But then when I got out of school, I worked at WCVP. It was a radio station, and it was downtown. I worked there.
How old were you when you got married?
24. Yeah.
Were you engaged a long time?
No, me and Daddy, we courted about 3 months, and then we got married.
Did you have a church wedding?
No. He taught me. We went to get our marriage license, and on the way back, he talked me into getting married. So we stopped at an old country preacher's house and got married. That after we got our marriage license.
It took you a few preachers' houses to find one that was at home, didn't it?
Yeah, we stopped at 2 or 3, and he said, well, I know one more preacher. Said, well, if he's not at home, we'll wait. And so the last house we stopped to, the preacher was there. He married us.
Was your mom and daddy mad?
My mother was real mad because she didn't have no idea, that I was going to get married. Well, I didn't intend to get married that day. I wanted to have me a little wedding. But your daddy talked me into it. He could talk me into anything. And when we come back to the house, Mama was on the back porch washing. She had a washing machine out there washing. And I was afraid to tell her that I got married. I called Daddy in the house and told him to tell Mama. And he went out there and told her. She got really, really mad and upset. Her face got red as far. And I thought for a few minutes she might have a heart attack. She got so mad. But after she got over it, she really liked Jerry. He was one of her favorite people. She really liked him.
And how long were you married before Daddy passed away?
52 years.
So it worked out, even though she was worried about it.
Yeah. She really liked Jerry when she got to know him. Of course, everybody did. Jerry was such a nice person. And he was a hard worker. He'd help anybody build them a house or whatever he could do to help them. He was good to people.
So what was your favorite thing to do when you were young?
Just a loafer, I guess. Fay and Woodrow, they'd take Murray. Me and Murray took places and we'd eat out. And one time they took us to Clayton, Georgia. And we had hamburger, steak, and French fries. And I thought it was so good. They just liked to take me and Murray places. They'd take us to the Tasty Freeze and we'd get ice cream.
When you were young, did your mother and father grow a garden, or did they put up food every year?
We had a garden. We moved in the house with Grandpa after Granny Truitt passed away. Mama had promised her she'd move in and take care of Grandpa. And we had a garden, but they decided to make the highway into a 4-lane. And when they did, it took our garden. So after that, we couldn't have a garden no more. We didn't have room. The highway took our garden.
But before that, you would put up food and...
Yeah.
Or she probably still put up food, even
Yeah.
she just had to get it from somebody else's garden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She'd can peaches and green beans. People would come selling peaches, and she'd buy a big bunch of peaches and can them. Canned green beans. Mama was a good cook.
When, after you were married, did you grow a garden every year?
Not for a long time. Not really till we moved over here. Because we rented a place and they wouldn't let us make a garden there where we lived. And so when we moved over here, then we made a garden.
You moved here probably late 70s?
Well, Paul was 2 years. Paul was a year old when we moved here. He still couldn't walk.
1975, something like that. So you grew a garden after that, the rest of your life. Yeah. Did you enjoy gardening?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. I loved to pick green beans. It was like that green bean patch was my gold mine. I loved it.
Yeah.
I picked a lot of green beans. One year I canned 98 quarts of green beans.
Yeah.
And we ate most of them.
Yeah. What else do you like to put up?
Well, I always make me a little kraut and bread and butter pickles. But mostly I'm better at canning green beans than anything else.
You do tomatoes and jelly, though.
Yeah. I make homemade jelly and tomatoes and tomato soup.
What do you think's the biggest difference between your childhood days and today, our modern world? What's the biggest difference?
Well, it's like I hold on to the old-timey ways, and a lot of people don't, A lot of people don't can any food and put it up for the winter, but I still do.
So I'm always talking about Appalachia, so when you hear that word Appalachia, what does it make you think of?
I think about how much I love these mountains, and I would never want to live anyplace else. I got me a job in the city, and by the time I got a job, I'd been looking for one a long time, and then I got so homesick I wanted to come home. I didn't take the job. I come on back home. And there I met Jerry across the road from my house. So I was glad I come back home.
Where were you at? What city were you in?
Columbus, Ohio.
Was that with part of your family?
Yeah, my sister, Genevieve, she lived there.
You went to visit her and then decided to get a job?
Yeah, she wanted me to live with her, you know.
But you was homesick?
I was homesick. I wanted to come back home.
Well, when you think about Appalachia, about celebrating Appalachia, what are the things that you'd celebrate about living here?
Well, the churches, the singing, and the food, and gardening, flowers. I love to have a lot of flowers growing.